So what I'm going to talk about today, I think, is very specific. Many of you won't be teaching child development to future teachers, but perhaps you can see the relevance in that our children are the legacy that we all have for the next generation, and therefore very important for us to pay attention to, as well as the fact, and I've heard this several times during the conference, and thinking about how we teach our subjects is sometimes as important as what we teach. So, the lens with which I approach this topic is as a mother, probably most important. As a former preschool teacher, I've taught prospective teachers and counselors, and since the year 2000 have worked on a textbook, and with my friend and with contributions from my husband, we just released the 8th edition of Child Development and Education. So I'm going to address 4 questions. Why is it important that we teach child development to teachers? How do we foster their understandings? Which developmental concepts are most important to teach? And finally, how can we use our pedagogy, our own teaching methods, to teach these subjects? All right, so first, why do we prepare teachers in child development? I think the answer is probably something that would be obvious, in that it matters a great deal to children. The research suggests when we study and compare teachers who have a good preparation in child development versus those that don't, they design lessons that are appropriate to the age of children and that are engaging. They recognize individual differences and they know how to accommodate them. They provide appropriate modifications and interventions for individual differences. They know how to build warm relationships with children. And they understand how to reach out to families, which is a critical part of our educational system, and they are better at creating inclusive classrooms. It's very important from the field of child development, which is interdisciplinary. It focuses on psychology, but also includes anthropology, medicine, social work, and other fields. And in this interdisciplinary field, accommodating individual differences is very, very important. So the talents, the abilities, the disabilities, the health, and the experiences that children have that may involve coming from an immigrant family, coping with prejudice in their community, growing up in economic poverty, and sometimes being exposed to violence at home or in the community. And therefore, teachers work with children from all of these backgrounds and ideally are prepared for that diversity. Mental health conditions are a very important part of what teachers work with today. And we are seeing an increase in mental health conditions, so anxiety, depression, other issues with adjustment, and clinicians believe that and report that these increases in mental health conditions are driven by social media, social isolation, not developing skills to be independent, and events in the world. So the pandemic was a big one in the United States and across the world. School shootings and school violence, political instability, war, etc. So these are factors that affect children and therefore affect teachers. Some of the concepts that we teach and that teachers learn are related to these mental health concerns. So helping children to develop routines that are warm and allow them to relax, to feel welcome and included. Recognizing how children act at school when they are distressed, and this is very much age-related. So a toddler, a 2-year-old child shows that distress differently than a high school student, but both are very important and need reassurance in an age-appropriate way. Developing partnerships with families, I mentioned, and the school connections that with counselors and others who can support children's mental health. Whoops. Okay, so the second question I want to pose is, how can we as college instructors understand, help teachers to understand child development? And really what I'm searching for here are best practices. And I've learned about these from my own experience, from the research on teacher education, and from colleagues and from writing books and getting reviews in my book. So in the United States, and probably in many other countries as well, the majority of our teacher education programs do require a course in child development. The field is a part of the requirements for becoming licensed, for the accreditation of teacher education programs, and for state and often local standards. The course is often a foundational course, meaning that it's toward the beginning of the program, and often is not connected with field experiences. So when students, the prospective teachers, are learning about child development, they're not necessarily in the classroom, but they do bring a lot of experiences themselves, having grown up in school systems. One criticism that is made is that we don't do a good job in helping our prospective teachers apply the information. Marcel in his presentation talked about case studies. That's one kind of application we can use, and I'll talk about others as well. So the high stakes for children of having teachers who are well prepared, coupled with the fact that we face challenges in making the information seem real and relevant to our prospective teachers, means that we have a responsibility to educate teachers thoughtfully. How do we do that? So one is that we try and recognize that everything that the teachers bring with them to their learning about becoming a teacher. And we know that one of the things they bring in at our university, quite a few of the prospective teachers are juggling part-time jobs. They have families, they may be caring for parents, they may be caring for their own children, and so there's a lot going on. They also bring their memories, their images of what worked for them, and sometimes that applies to their future teaching, and sometimes it's out of date, but they're very real experiences that affect their learning. And some students just believe that the material is dull or just common sense. And I should say in the research that those who see child development as a science-based field tend to learn more, and that probably makes sense because they're motivated to learn a body of knowledge that will help them out. We also try to address the misconceptions that they may have. And we all have misconceptions in any field. Within child development, a few of these that I've listed on the right-hand side have been documented. It's the belief, for example, that children's intelligence is fixed. In other words, they have what they come with, and we're not going to be able to change that. Well, that's not correct. There's a lot that can be done to enhance the intellectual abilities of children, including those who have disabilities, and so we try to confront and overcome that challenge. Sometimes prospective teachers believe, maybe all of us believe, that children who have show misbehavior, difficulty at school, that's due to problems at home, and therefore there's not much we can do about it. In reality, the children's experiences are very much affected by home, certainly, but also their experiences in school, and there is a lot we can do to help them adjust. Okay, I'm going to move on. We also, again, in terms of best practices, try to recognize and build on the assets that teachers bring with them to their learning. So in my experience, the teachers often have a great deal of compassion for children. So that's something I want to use in my teaching and in my writing to help them see how they can adjust to these differences in children, their learning capacity. Ethical commitments are very important. They're manifested differently depending on the background, sometimes the religious background, the ideological background that our teachers have. But it is expected in law and in school policy that teachers will do their best to reach all children. And of course, their personal experiences in growing up. So we try to build on what's working, making informed choices with priorities, since child development is a large interdisciplinary field that covers systematic growth from the prenatal period through the end of secondary school. We can't cover it all, and so we try and make choices. Using engaging methods, things that get our teachers mentally processing the material, when we can, immersing them in applications and incorporating realistic scenarios. We try to avail of teaching resources. You probably can't read the details here, but I just want to point out that national and international associations give us guidance on how to teach child development. The Society for Research in Child Development is one. They have a nice website with materials available. The American Psychological Association, and probably in your countries as well, you can get this kind of guidance. Setting priorities, we talked about. These are ones that are important to me, is that children's development is multifaceted. It includes their intellectual development, language, social emotional development, brain development, physical development, and so forth, all very much intertwined and important. Age-related trends occur with significant variations in timing and pathways. So If you take a look at early motor development, the reaching for objects, motor skills, learning to walk, language development, and so forth, there are tend to be some common pathways, but often very large differences in the age that children achieve these. Every child is unique and has strengths and also areas of vulnerability. Both are important to look at if we want to reach and help children. And building relationships with students and families is critical. So that's one of the, along with neurological development, the focus on teacher-student relationships is a huge area of emphasis today. And we're seeing that it is very helpful, positive relationships, very helpful, and sometimes not easily achieved with all children. And that becomes an equity issue, something we need to work with. I mentioned ethics earlier. This statement on the right-hand side of the slide comes from our local district in Colorado in the United States. We're smack in the middle of the United States near the Rocky Mountains. And in our local school district, 86 languages are spoken. Children come primarily from the United States, but there's a huge number of children from immigrant families from around the world. And so this statement comes from the teacher handbook and emphasizes the responsibility that we have as teachers to put our students first, also to look after ourselves so we can do that right, to view diversity as an asset, and to believe in the ability of all children to learn. So if we looked at, I suspect in your areas as well, you would see similar kinds of ethical statements, probably written in a slightly different way, but that responsibility is something that we try and emphasize for our teachers, because it's not always easy to reach and even to like every individual child. We have something to overcome. All right, we try to scaffold self-reflection, and there are a few different models that some that might gravitate to some teachers more than others. I've listed a few here. Cultural humility, the idea that we have to be always vigilant to learning about other cultures, other societies, and we can be wrong. We need to continue to learn. Another one that some teachers gravitate to is that of social justice, trying to rectify challenges within a school. For example, teachers may find that some children from different ethnic backgrounds have an easier time getting services, for example, being labeled and being given a gifted and talented program, and that's not fair if there are disparities there. And so they need to work with their colleagues in their school to try and overcome those problems. Balanced ecological frameworks make sense to some teachers. It's the idea, again, that children are coming with certain strengths and limitations, and they need to try and read these and accommodate them. And as they go through their programs, mentorship and coaching are tools for self-reflection. The idea that we all need a little help in addressing children's needs. So we try and teach practical tools for providing a high-quality education. I've listed some that are often addressed in a child development course. establishing a warm climate for learning, and we try and do that ourselves with our teachers, helping them understand informal and formal ways to assess children, what the special education system is and how we can take advantage of it, mental health services, and then significantly what it means to respond to the age of children at different levels in terms of teaching subject matter. Strategies for fostering self-regulation. Another important topic that we're looking at and integrating into academic instruction as well as behavioral control, and finding that a lot needs to be invested up front in the classroom, but that with support, children can learn to adhere to school policies and, in a sense, look after themselves. Whether that's preschool children putting on coat or a high school student doing a complicated project. We also try to use methods that convey the relevance of developmental concepts. The quote on the right-hand side comes from our National Institute for Child Health and Human Development, and again suggests that we're probably doing a good job with conveying content, but the relevance for prospective teachers and helping them to see what it means in a real classroom is something we're neglecting and we need to work on, using concrete examples, scenarios, immersion, and so forth, depending on where the teachers are in their programs. Our colleagues have a lot of advice, and when we can, we try and listen to it. Developing the climate so that the teachers themselves can feel safe and they can learn and they can make mistakes and they can admit when they might be wrong. Asking teachers at the beginning and ending of a course what they believe about children and education, showing, and teachers repeatedly want to be shown. What does it mean to care for a young child with sensitivity? We can't just tell them, we have to show them. And often the recommendation is to look at, show brief video clips, assign case studies with clear developmental concepts, and have our prospective teachers work through those. So what developmental concepts are worth emphasizing? The typical progressions are important, many routes to individuality, and how to address, with the knowledge of what typical development is and a broad understanding of diversity, teachers are better prepared to think through if a student might need an intervention, further assessment, and so forth. So most teachers, except maybe the art teacher, the physical education teacher, music, most teachers will focus in on one age level. We try to give them a sense of what development looks like from prenatal development, infancy, through late adolescent, and then hone in onto a particular age. What it means to build an inclusive and productive environment for everyone is important, and integrating multiple formats of instruction. So you won't be able to read the fine print here, but let's see if I can use the... At the bottom of the pyramid here, we have what we try and do for what we encourage our teachers to do for all children, which is setting up a a safe environment that's conducive for learning. Recognizing, if you can look one level up in the blue part of the pyramid, that not everyone's going to get it the first time or the second time or the third time, and they're going to need, some children are going to need a little bit more support. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, some children are going to need even more intensive and often individualized support. So this pyramid, called the the multi-tiered developmental framework, is one that we can approach from academically, but also in terms of behavioral support. So some children understand and find it easy to follow the rules at a young age. Others don't, and they need more support, either in small groups or individualized. Another framework that is becoming increasingly popular is called the Universal Design for Learning. And what this means is equipping teachers to look at any given lesson from the perspective of what would that mean for children who need to be, for engagement, need to be motivated in different ways. They may have different goals, different background knowledge. The second box down, representation, is perhaps rather than simply talking at children, we may need charts, we may need to use music, art, and a variety of frameworks to really to reach the diversity of our learners. And then finally, action and expression is showing our teachers how they can express their knowledge in different ways. Maybe it's an oral report, but it also might be an art project or a written essay or something that they build with clay or some other format. I talked about earlier about the positive relationships with teachers. And the research, there's a lot of research in this area now, and it's showing that those children who develop good relationships with teachers and vice versa, they try harder at school, they overcome difficulties in their assignments, they show better conduct, they're more engaged, enthusiastic, and these effects are especially strong for students from low-income families and students of color, and it's this latter group for which the relationships in general tend not to be as positive, and therefore we have a responsibility to look at them carefully and try to make them so. So I think it's also important to equip our teachers to look for, to understand how prejudice works in a school system. So we have bullies, we have children who are ostracized, and how that there are stereotypes that exist. How does that happen? What can they do to diminish those effects? And again, working effectively with families who come in many forms: two-parent families, one-parent families, parents who are divorced, single, parents who are gay, lesbian, parents who may be incarcerated, parents who may be in the military and moving a lot. These require sometimes some sensitivity and strategies for reaching out to be effective partners with them. So I don't know if anyone's heard about the class model, but it has been growing in popularity. It's a kind of a three-model system based on observation of teachers, and so it deals with the instructional support, that teachers give, the emotional support, and management support. And again, we're finding that these are aspects that are highly related to students' learning. So, final question is, how can instructors use pedagogies and textbooks, other materials to enhance their impact? And here I'm going to draw from my book and two things that we've tried to do that are new, or that we emphasize more this time. So one is providing real examples of teachers who are applying certain strategies, such as getting and keeping children's attention, helping them self-regulate, helping them act in a pro-socially appropriate way, so sharing and so forth. And then providing examples of that. You won't be able to read the fine print, but you'll get the idea, I hope, that real teachers, often they're based on case studies and others of teachers doing these things and how they help children within that general category. And in this example, it's scaffolding children's performance on challenging tasks. So the teachers are breaking it up, they're providing tools, they're checking with children along the way and so forth. And that at the end of that, those kind of tables and instructions, they then reflect on what that means for their own learning. So we're trying to reach out and make it meaningful to them. So let me give you 3 examples. One are those first attachments and bonds are very important. We know that consistently from our own experience. But also, what does that mean for the teachers? What were their first attachments like? So we asked them to reflect on those experiences and introduce the concept of an earned secure attachment, which means basically that even adults who've had difficulty in their early relationships are often able to overcome these challenges, and so we introduced that idea to the teachers. So this is an example of self-regulation, which applies to children, and again, you can't see the fine print, but what I'm hoping you can take away is the question for the teachers of to keep track of their own self-regulation as learners over a 3-week period. So how are they planning their studies? How do they go about it? How do they reflect on how well they did, and what adjustments do they make as learners? Those are highly relevant to what we ask children to do, and this gives them direct experience themselves. Final examples on social cognitive biases, which are something that we all are prone to, but they can get us, and they're a natural part of our human life, they can get us in trouble when we're teaching. And so we ask the teachers to take a look at certain biases that they may have and how that can affect their teaching. So the second category is using video examples and brief video examples to try and demonstrate concepts. That's something many of you may already be doing. I think they can be very powerful. So I'll just show you from chapter 1 what these kind of look like. I'm not going to show the tape, I don't have time. But you'll see you have a teacher here with toddlers, and we ask the prospective teachers to explain what do they see that suggests sensitivity on the part of this teacher, and how does she go about setting up the room so that age-appropriate exploration is possible. Then we have again, from our different levels, age levels that we focus on, this is a kindergarten and early childhood teacher, and we ask the students, the prospective teachers, to notice how does a teacher go about extracting, embracing, scaffolding the knowledge of children in the stories that they wrote together. In an elementary school, the children are about 9, 10, I think, at this age, and the teachers are asked, what do you see? How is this teacher going about teaching science? She's using cylinders and liquids and beakers. What do the students do? What do they seem to be learning? A middle school teacher, so then it would be about age 11, 12, who encourages the students to share the poems they've wrote about themselves. And finally, a high school teacher who just does a fantastic job teaching, I think it's geometry, and is extremely patient with the student. He's focusing on the one student there. And so how can they apply that kind of resolve and persistence and sensitivity in their teaching? Okay, so in summary, having teachers who understand child development matters a great deal to the children they teach, and that we as college instructors can do a lot within the resources that we have, within the time we have with our prospective teachers, to help them understand these concepts, particularly if we can make them relevant, and so forth.